But first, let me bring in Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, for this exclusive interview. Priti, thank you so much for
How
joining
are
me
you,
on my
Dan?
first show back. I'm okay. I mean, I just have to say, I feel so much gratitude that I was one of the lucky ones, because there's this horrible period when you're fighting this thing, and I imagine it's what Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, must have gone through as well, where you wonder which way it's going to go. And I was one of the ones, a bit like Matt Hancock, who was able to come out of my 7 days in self-isolation feeling pretty good. But obviously we know with the Prime Minister it went the other way. And I have to ask you, Priti, he is now heading into a 4th day in intensive care. Do you know if his health has improved at all?
Well, look, first of all, it's great that you're back. And,
Thank you.
what you've experienced is being experienced by so many other people around the
Absolutely.
country. And that's
Absolutely.
why we've taken the approach that we're taking. But, you've asked about the Prime Minister. He is doing well from what we're hearing. Obviously, you'll get the official updates from Downing Street. But, I think we should take great heart from the fact that he is in the care of the NHS. They're looking after him in the best possible way. And, of course, we're all rooting for him. He's, really great. And we just want him to get well and we all send him our best wishes.
When did you last speak to him?
So because I have been working every day, so I've been involved in every single, key government cross Zoom meeting, because everything is by technology right now. So I spoke to him last week. So that would have been, I think, probably around the time of the last cabinet meeting, in fact, which was the last formal meeting I was involved with him. And it was clear, quite frankly, he was unwell and he needed to get rest and recuperation. And I do think, he is our Prime Minister. He's a, political leader of our nation. He is the one that's been working flat out leading this. We now need to give him the time and space to recover, get well. All our best wishes are with him. And as I said, he's in the best possible place right now with all the medical support that he needs. And, we wish him well.
Now, of course, the health of other senior ministers becomes much more important now. Obviously, Dominic Raab is leading the government,
Yes.
but ministers like yourself and Rishi Sunak take on a much more important role, especially given Michael Gove is in self-isolation himself now. So what measures are senior ministers taking to protect themselves now?
Well, it's a really important question. And, this comes back down to our own advice. We are staying at home where we can, but also you would have seen we're all using technology a lot more. Some of us still have to come into our departments for various reasons because of the nature of the work that we do. So obviously Homeland Security matters in the remit that I have. And I have a lot of work that cuts across security, national security, where I do need to come in. But actually we're minimizing that. And apart from that, obviously staying at home and conducting business. I mean, being in government is a 7-day-a-week job. It's not as if you can just sort of sit at home and just work from home. We have to be flexible. But that also means we have to align with our colleagues in other government departments, our officials across other government departments, not just here, but Cabinet Office. So we've all changed our way of working quite dramatically. And of course, trying to stay fit and well. This is all part of our own national well-being. Everybody right now needs to be, I think, very self-aware, self-conscious, undertaking the right measures, washing our hands. There's a joke in my household. My husband thinks, I'm OCD. I'm always washing my hands. But quite frankly, we have to do that to stay well. And obviously, keeping distance as well in any meetings that we are having, keeping our social distance, respecting that and doing exactly the same, if we're going out for a walk, for example, during the day in that very restricted way in which we're all trying to get a bit of fresh air and, fitness right now.
Now, of course, it's a very significant weekend ahead, a bank holiday weekend, likely to be a very hot weekend in many parts of the country, Priti. It has been reported today that 5 chief constables want tougher coronavirus lockdown conditions. Are you considering that?
No, absolutely not. And what I would say is that I speak to the police every day. In fact, I'm leading operational calls every single day with our police, our blue light family, basically, our police forces across the country and the leadership in policing. I think first and foremost, it is really important to recognise that the measures that we've put in place, you've got to remember this is now week 3, so to speak. I worked on what we call the COVID emergency accountability legislation, put in place the measures around policing. And I'd really like to pay tribute to the majority of the British people for doing the right thing in terms of staying at home. And of course, lovely weather. We all love lovely weather. It's spring, it's Easter. But at the same time, the police will always use a common sense approach. We have policing by consent in the United Kingdom. The police are part of our local fabric in our community. They engage with the public, and that is crucial in the way in which they engage, explain, and encourage members of the public to really do the right thing. And I have to say, I do pay tribute to the majority of the British public when you look at the way in which they're behaving, working, even shopping right now, going to the supermarket with restrictive measures. Enforcement will always be used as a last resort. And I know that every police officer takes this responsibility, very seriously, because that's not the space that they're always in. And they are the local faces of their communities. They work with community groups and organisations, and that's absolutely what they will do right now. And they will continue to do that brilliantly once we are through this crisis.
Though, do you have a bit of concern about Nick Adderley, the Chief Constable of the Northamptonshire Police, who has been all over the internet today for suggesting that there's the chance, he's not saying they're going to do it at the moment, there's the chance that roadblocks might step up. And he's even suggested that at some point the police might start to marshal supermarkets and check the items in baskets and trolleys to see whether it's a legitimate, necessary item. He says, be under no illusion, if people do not heed the warnings and the pleas I'm making today, we will start to do that. Is that not an example of police overreach?
Well,
Priti?
that's not appropriate. Let me be clear about that. And, I work with the police in leadership every single day of the week and have been since this crisis, and even working into this crisis as well. That is not the guidance. That is not, down to the measures that we've been adopting thus far. I think, though, what we should just say about this weekend in particular, the weather is going to be good. It is Easter. We want to, we really do need to all take responsibility here. And it's not about overreach. It is absolutely not about overreach. And it is wrong. I mean, we had some stories, scurrilous stories, if I may say so, a few weeks ago about people officers snooping through shopping baskets and removing Easter eggs. In fact, I understand that became a trade in standards issue, and it wasn't the police. That is not what the police are there to do. The police, as I said, are part of public order, part of the local community. But we're very conscious. This is the other thing we must recognise. In some parts of the country, this has been difficult. In beautiful parts of the country where tourists have been going, making the most of the nice weather, also those with holiday homes, etc. That's exactly what we want to avoid, because that puts pressure on local communities.
But to be very clear, though, for our listeners, if you are walking in the park, for example, and perhaps you're elderly, and you want to sit down to have a little break on the park bench, you're on your own, you're keeping your distance from everyone, is that breaking the rules? Because some police forces have taken to using emergency tape all over park benches, which just feels like the messaging is a little bit confusing about what you can and cannot do.
So I'll be very candid. Not everybody's going to get this right, and it has taken a couple of weeks for these measures to bed in, because this has been unprecedented. And don't forget, the police, the police have got these new powers that, they are working with right now. But you're right. We want our public spaces to be respected and, I think, utilised in the right way. We want people to be, get to make the most of at least getting out in the right kind of way, practicing social distancing. But this is not about heavy-handed law enforcement. I think I really must emphasise that. There is a balance of this. And I do pay credit to the police, because these are extraordinary times. They exercise their judgment. Policing by consent means that officers, based on guidance, they exercise their judgment on the scenarios and the situations and the circumstances that they are in. But the fact of the matter is, if you're having a garden party, a house party, or you're, involved in a mass gathering in a public place, and, don't be surprised if the police do come up to you and ask you to stop doing that.
No, absolutely.
And that's what we want to, that's exactly what we want to stop. But the majority of the British public have been doing the right thing, and they've been working with the police in the right way. And that's the nature of policing by consent in the United Kingdom.
A couple of other very important issues that are part of your brief. Do you have any concern over the potential for our enemies and terrorist groups, for example, to use this crisis to launch attacks? And are the police and authorities prepared for that possibility?
Well, it's an important question, and in fact, I spend every day of my, working day basically looking at threats and challenges and the risk to our homeland security. We're seeing all sorts of things, but also we are seeing new threats that are emerging, very much online harms, and also threats in terms of cyber fraud and breaches of cyber security. As a result, there are more protective measures that we are undertaking. So, just by way of example, we're seeing much more in terms of financial fraud online. We're seeing all sorts of products being marketed online fraudulently under the COVID-19 banner. We're seeing more activity in the space and the sphere of online harms, particularly around vulnerable people and children. And that is something that I'm working with our National Crime Agency on right now. A lot more of activity there as people are locked in homes and perhaps spending, I think I should say, the wrong type of people, perpetrators of crime and criminal activity, spending time on the internet. So there is a lot of work that's taking place across the whole of law enforcement. And by that, I do mean the crime agency, obviously our security and intelligence services as well. We absolutely are on it. They themselves, I'll be very candid, are facing a range of challenges themselves in terms of ways of working. But notwithstanding that, across the policing and intelligence community, I've been literally, they are incredible in what they're doing. But the intelligence that they're being fed in, what we see day to day, but also the responsiveness of them. We're seeing less crime, but actually we're seeing them actually deal with more crime because they're able to see more crime, perhaps in a way in which they've not been able to previously.
Another very important issue, domestic abuse and the potential for victims to come under more harm during a lockdown. Are you considering any new measures to help the victims of domestic abuse at this time?
Yes, well, I have been concerned about this, and I spoke about this quite early on during this pandemic. And first of all, we're seeing this is an absolute priority for the police, and we are seeing a range of reports. In fact, I've spent a lot of my time today speaking to many of the charities, third parties that work as providers, actually support services and the support network for domestic abuse, and also the Victims Commissioner. There is a lot of work that's taking place. I've already been resourcing this area, but of course, the longer this continues, this pandemic, there'll be all sorts of issues around people staying at home and actually victims of abuse being with their perpetrators. And we are finding other ways in which we can give them the support, but also ways in which we can do more on prevention and protection. So there is a lot of work. I've been working with the police and charities, the sector itself, on how we can improve our response, make sure we get resources out there on the front line in a very different way because of this pandemic. I'll be outlining more details in forthcoming days and the days to come. But I can absolutely give an assurance that across government, and this isn't just from a Home Office perspective, but when it comes to vulnerable children, domestic abuse victims, there is a lot of cross-government work that's taking place. And we are leading a lot of this right down to, refugees with MHCLG, right down to children with the Department of Education, as well as the health and welfare considerations that we have to constantly think about.
And Priti, it's clear that you are doing so much work behind the scenes at the moment, but Yvette Cooper, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, has been very forceful in terms of trying to get you in front of the committee. You have said you're disappointed at the increasingly adversarial tone of the exchanges between yourself and the committee and have pledged to now be there at some point before the end of April. Are you suspicious that she wants to get you into public to talk to you about the allegations of bullying that were made against you before the start of this crisis? And do you want to go on the record now to deny those allegations?
Well, no, that's not what this is about at all, because I think it's important. I've actually offered the chair of the committee regular briefings throughout this pandemic, including access to classified and operational material, which myself and ministers obviously see. So, I think it's a bit disappointing at the time of the crisis. when I've already offered a date as well, that there is a bit of politicking going on. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at the work of the Home Office across this whole period of the pandemic, ranging from, freeing up, making it cost free for people to call the police through 101 services, through the extension of NHS visas, to various things that we've been doing on fraud, cyber, national security, policing every single day, the real support that we're giving to the front line. I think a lot of that is self-evident. And I quite frankly think it's, a bit of politicking, when at the time when we have already given and offered access to the select committee, not just the chair, but the entire committee, access to the department, myself, in terms of another date. It's just I just think it's just politics, basically.
Well, thank you so much for being here for my first show back. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, so it's much appreciated you taking that time. That is the Home Secretary, Priti Patel.